May is Stroke Awareness Month here in the United States, and I've got something special and a little different for you today. I've got Stephanie Hopwood here today, who is a physical therapist, a certified stroke rehab specialist, and a stroke survivor herself. And she has written an ebook, an amazing ebook called Stroke Recovery Momentum, which details how to keep your momentum going in your stroke recovery journey even when the going gets tough. She has very generously allowed us to use her book as a fundraiser for post-stroke all during the month of May so that we can continue to raise funds and keep our content free for stroke survivors around the globe. All month long in May, every donation that you make to Post-Stroke's PayPal fundraiser will get you a free copy of Stephanie's ebook. And after today's interview, you are definitely going to want to read it. Let's get into it. So Stephanie, can you share a little bit about yourself? How long have you been practicing as a physical therapist, and were you practicing when you had your stroke?
I've been a physical therapist about 14 years, and at the time of my stroke, I had been a PT for about 10 years.
What year did you have your stroke?
It was in August of 2020.
So what made you want to write this ebook?
I realized as a physical therapist, I can only directly help a certain number of people. Even over the course of years, it still is not going to be as many as if I were to publish some sort of material. So it's really just, let's get beyond the borders of a clinic and share my experience and my knowledge as a physical therapist as well to help as many people as possible.
I definitely understand that. You know, I was working as an OT, couple different settings, skilled nursing facilities, home health care, and yeah, it is great work, and I love the work of being a therapist, but yeah, you are only working one-on-one with somebody at a time, typically. So starting post-stroke, writing a book are ways that we can help reach a lot more people and share your experience, which is huge. How do you feel like your experience as a stroke survivor, but also as a physical therapist, how do you feel that your practice as a PT impacted your stroke recovery journey?
I would say the bigger impact was more on my practice as a physical therapist. Yes, my knowledge did impact my own personal recovery because I knew the things to do. Whether I did them or not was a different question, but I knew the things to do. But I felt like it was more of an impact on my relationship with my patients and how I practiced after I had my stroke.
Yeah. Well, and I know that you give some examples of that in the book, but would you share one of those now?
Absolutely. I find that having been in their shoes before helps them to know that they're talking to someone who knows what it's like. There have been many times I'm able to, likely the first person in the healthcare world anyways, to put words to what they've been feeling or experiencing and haven't been able to kind of pinpoint how to explain it even to a family member. I remember a patient being referred to us for knee pain who had actually had a stroke a couple of years prior, and that was actually why she was having her knee pain, because she was hyperextending her knee with every step. So I was kind of able to talk her through why that is. She already had an ankle foot orthosis, an AFO, and I helped her in getting a different one that would actually help her stop the hyperextension.
That's fantastic. And so did that help to resolve her knee pain?
Absolutely.
See, that's great. She's a great PT too. Of course, we know that. In your book, you talk about how our culture is so set on instant gratification, which I think is so true, and how putting in the work, while it's harder, has better results. And obviously, we know that. Can you give some examples of putting that in the context of stroke recovery?
Yes, so instant gratification is, like you said, it's just part of our culture now. And as we now become patients, or stroke survivors in this case, it's no different. I tried that once, I maybe tried it 3 times. Why isn't it better yet? And that's not how the body works. We have to actually cater to how our physiology, how our anatomy, and our brain actually operates, and none of that is instant gratification. It has to happen over time. It's similar, a different story, but same thing after a surgery. Why aren't I better? It's because everything has to heal. Well, it's the same thing in our brains. It has to heal, and it all takes way longer than we actually want it to be.
Yes. I feel like I talk about, and I hear a lot from stroke survivors in the comments on Instagram and different places that, having patience is one of the hardest parts of recovery, and patience with your brain and your body as they're healing. And something that I talk about a lot is that, having a neurological injury is very different than having you've broken a bone. They heal very differently, and neurological injuries heal much slower, and that can be super difficult because when something bad happens to us, or when we have an injury or an illness or a disease, we want to be better immediately. I feel like that's just natural. That's what we want. And unfortunately, that's just not how our brains and our bodies heal.
In the book, I talk about what it is to fully recover versus having a new normal. I like to use the phrase having a new normal because I can have an infinite number of those versus thinking of full recovery, that's a hard stop. And in my world, I don't want a hard stop for my recovery. I want to have the option at least to be able to keep working. I mean, even to this day, as we're sitting here right now, I don't have very good fine motor control in my left hand. I want to be able to, I like the thought of being able to keep working on that in the future rather than this is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I love that you said that there's not you don't have to look at it as a hard stop, that there is continuous momentum.
Which is different than what you're told as a patient in front of your doctor. At least my experience, and my patients tell me all the time, my doctor said I have 6 months. I think the longest time frame I've heard, and was probably my own doctor, you have 12 months. None of that's true.
No, it's not true. That is such a pervasive myth, the 1-year recovery myth, that all you're going to get at 12 months is where you're going to be. And you're right, it's absolutely not true. And I think we're starting to see that more in research studies, finally starting to come out. But I mean, anecdotally, I'm sure with the stroke survivors that you've worked with, what you've seen in your own recovery, it's just that, no, even years down the road, 15, 20 plus years, there is always the potential for progress. It may not be what we call a hard stop full recovery, but you can continue to see progress, and it's always possible regardless of where you're at in that kind of recovery journey.
Absolutely.
I feel like people get so disheartened when they hear, oh, well, if you're at 12 months, then that's it.
I mean, they're typically speaking to statistics.
Yes.
Sure, the vast majority happen in the first 6 to 12 months, but the way it's presented is that's it.
Yeah.
And it's not. Like you're saying, like 15, 20 years, I think of it similar to like your plant right here. If I provide it the right environment, my brain can still get better. My body can still get better because I'm providing that correct environment, the right nutrients, etc.
And I think for stroke recovery, this often comes down to the principles of neuroplasticity, which I know that you definitely talk about in your book. Anything that you want to highlight specifically about neuroplasticity?
In my little neuro notes?
Yes.
In most of the chapters, not all. I would say that repetition. 2 things stand out. Repetition, which is not just the 3 times 10 that I even prescribe for my patients, is more like 100 to 400 in a day. As far as number of repetitions go. The other part would be salience. It has to mean something to you. You can't just randomly do this exercise 400 times, hope it translates into what you want it to. Do the thing that you're wanting to do. If I'm wanting to stand up and sit down because I can't well right now, I'm going to stand up and sit down as many times as my body will let me. Because it's important to me. It's going to create that connection better than if I just did a random exercise.
Oh, that's probably one of my favorite principles too, and especially as an OT, where we typically focus on making sure people are safe and as independent as they can be in their everyday activities. But, people want to get back to doing those things, whether it's, sitting up from a chair, being able to take a step forward, walk in their home, being able to cook a meal for themselves. And so finding ways to work on recovery in the context of those everyday activities can be part of your home therapy too. In your book, you mention how stroke recovery is a marathon and not a sprint, which we have touched on a little bit in how our body and brain heal, especially from a neurological injury. It's hard though, as you mentioned in your book, what your book is all about is keeping that momentum going even when things get hard over time, because it doesn't happen quickly. You talk about the definition of grit being passion, perseverance, and long-term goals. What is your best advice to stroke survivors who are trying to persevere towards those long-term goals, and it is taking a long time, it's really hard to do, and how to keep that perseverance going?
I talk about this in a different part of the book, but remembering your why. If you keep your why in mind, it can help feed that perseverance, help feed, in a different chapter, the willpower. And if you keep that, it's almost like that carrot dangling out in front of you, just keep looking at it. If that means you put a picture of what your goal is, maybe it's to go on a vacation to Maui or something, well, keep looking at that picture every day. I got to be able to stand up because I'm going to walk on that beach one day.
Oh, that's a great example. Yeah, just putting it at the forefront of your brain sounds like having it someplace where you can see it, you can smell it, you can taste it, you have your why right in front of you. And I mean, I think that's important, not just for stroke recovery, but just for your life and being the type of person that you want to be. You do talk a bit about identity and how that informs, choices that you make in your stroke recovery. And I think that also deals with perseverance as well, in defining the type of person that you want to be, who you see yourself as. You mentioned one of my favorite books, Atomic Habits by James Clear. I love that book. If you haven't read it, you should read it. But in that book, what you're talking about, he also says, every decision that you make is voting for the type of person that you want to be. Mm-hmm. I think that is especially important in stroke recovery because it can be what helps get you out of bed during the day. It can be what helps you do your home exercise routine or your activities, your home therapy activities, to get out and actually go to your outpatient therapy. Having your why and knowing who you want to be, setting your identity. Can you speak to maybe how you've seen that in your patients, now on the other side of things, and how having that identity in place, having that why in place has helped your patients get to reach their goals?
I think one piece that maybe I don't touch on enough in the book is actually, who do I want to be in relation to those around me? Like a spouse or some sort of caregiver person type in your life. Like, who do I want to be towards them? Because a lot of survivors need them. They can't do certain things without help. And so how do I want to treat you? And who do I want to be, even when I'm frustrated? Or let's turn the tables, you're frustrated with me. Who do I want to be in spite of that? Whether I'm the frustrated person or someone's frustrated with me, in those heated moments, who do I want to be? That's kind of what comes to mind when I hear you ask that question.
So chapter 4 is all about courage, and you provide this amazing definition that courage is willingness to act over fear. So as someone with an anxiety disorder myself, overcoming fear and anxiety about many things in life is very difficult. What would you say is your best advice for stroke survivors dealing with fear and anxiety after their stroke? Maybe it's about having another stroke, about disability, about feeling like a burden. But what is your best advice to try to overcome this fear and anxiety in their stroke recovery journey?
I would actually focus on the word control, because we try, whether you're a stroke survivor or not, we just try to control as much as we can because it gives us a sense of security. And we just can't control all that much. It's like this much compared to what we think we can actually do. So asking yourself that question of, is this something that I have control over or not? And if it's not, do your best to redirect. And then again, not to repeat myself, but having your why as an ever-present reminder is also something that can, I'm really afraid of going to the grocery store, but my goal is to be able to prepare a meal for my family again. So I'm gonna do my darndest to just take one step at a time in that grocery store, hold real tight to that cart if I need to, and whatever it is that you need to do to help yourself, just take one step at a time. It's not this huge leap to overcome a fear. It's often step by step that we do something like that.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, and I think too, like, definitely guilty, because I think when you have anxiety and fear, there is that underlying sense of lack of control contributing to that fear and anxiety. And so something that I've talked about in a couple recent videos is trying to control the things that you can, like you're talking about, and in small steps, not trying to tackle the whole big thing all in one day. And then trying to learn to let go of the things that you can't control, which for someone with an anxiety disorder is very difficult. And for someone with generalized anxiety or fear after a traumatic health event, that is very difficult to do too. But I think that's amazing advice. Yeah, controlling what you can, controlling in small steps the things that you can, and not trying to overcome too much at one time and making that end goal too big, because that can be overwhelming too. Mm-hmm. So speaking of overcoming fears and anxiety through controlling what you can and controlling small steps, you have two chapters about habits, which are amazing chapters. You talk about, in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, having cues and rewards and how important that is in establishing new habits. Can you talk about how someone can use cues and rewards, taking small steps to establish these new habits and gain some control back in their lives?
As far as cues and rewards go, I would encourage folks to use a habit they already have. Like, I brush my teeth every morning, and while I brush my teeth, I'm going to do my heel raises, because that's an exercise my physical therapist gave me so that I can get better balance, because our calf muscles are important for that. I'm already doing it, I'm already brushing my teeth, so now I'm going to add something while I'm brushing my teeth. And then as we go to the rewards side of things, you can come up with something on your own. Maybe every time I do it, I get X, Y, and Z. Or if I get 5 days in a row, then I get to treat myself to an ice cream on my way home from work, or when I went out with my grocery store, shopping trip, whatever it is.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and it's nice too, like you mentioned, you're using a cue. That's another habit that you already have established. Mm-hmm. We know definitely from my own research into habit science that it's easier when you're using a habit that you already have established, and habit stack, where you're stacking another habit onto that. It's making it a lot easier to encourage and establish a new habit. Because if you're starting something fresh out of the box and you just try to do it randomly, it's probably not going to stick.
Or it's really hard to make it stick.
Yes.
And if you're trying to choose a new habit like that, you got to make it as easy as possible. For example, myself, I would pre-tie my shoes that I wear to work out in. So when I get to the exercise room, I just slip my slippers off and I just put my feet right into those shoes and I get to start my workout.
Smart. I love that. Yeah, and for me, it's like I've been trying to go out for a walk every day at the end of my workday. So for me, it's actually time-based. I know that when it hits 5:30, it's time for me to get out and go walk. So I have my workout clothes ready in a certain place in my closet. So it's kind of there when I go change. I know it's time to go walk. So we've talked about how establishing new habits can be really hard, using cues and rewards to make that a little bit easier. But ultimately, establishing new habits is a way to try to get to a goal, trying to reach a goal. And in your book, you talk about the importance of anybody, but especially stroke survivors, not letting somebody else dictate what their goals are. That, stroke survivors, you can set your own goals for recovery, and the importance of having some of those shoot for the moon long-term goals, so that even if you're not quite there yet, you have things that you can see in your future that you're working towards. How do you recommend balancing those shoot for the moon long-term goals with shorter term goals and making some of those things more achievable?
If you think of the big picture, that shoot for the moon goal, you have to pare it down, break it down step by step. So if I want to stand up, what do I need to be able to do? I have to be able to bend far enough forward. I have to have enough strength in both my arms and my legs in order to push myself up. Once I'm there, I also have to have balance. So what are the different pieces of this task that I need to be able to do in order to accomplish my goal, and then pick one, maybe two of those pieces and work on those first.
I think breaking down, those goals into those achievable pieces, those short-term goals, is really important. You talk a little bit about SMART goals, which is something that I've referenced in my videos too. You're wanting to be really specific, making those things measurable and, like we talked about, achievable, realistic, and then attaching a time to those goals, because I think that is important. It's not that you necessarily expect that, hey, I'm 100% going to meet it by this date, but it gives you something to work towards. It gives you a time frame to try to be working towards. Do you find that that's helpful for your patients as well?
I find it helpful. I think they find it helpful, but I also think they find it frustrating when they don't meet it.
Sure, absolutely.
But then we just have that conversation again about patience and how much slower everything is. All my patients know my hand gestures as far as, this is what we want recovery to look like, but what does it actually look like? It looks like this. As long as the overall trajectory is going up, we're good. And it's those kind of dips that they're, dang it, I didn't meet my goal, but you know what? Eventually you keep pushing forward and you keep going with that grit and it turns right up.
Yeah. Your last chapter is all about hope, which something I've talked about a lot, that, we have to have in stroke recovery. Like if there is not hope, what is anybody working towards? There has to be hope. You give us the quote, "Hope is the bridge between the impossible and the possible," which I think is really lovely and true. Can you talk about the role that hope plays in stroke recovery and how somebody can hang on to that even when things do get frustrating?
When I hear you ask that question, I have a particular patient that comes to mind, and it's one I talk about in the book, where it's a gentleman who was trying to stand up and just could not let go of his recliner. And it was the hope of one day walking again that kept him going, that kept him trying, that he would get so frustrated with himself that he couldn't just let go in order to actually stand up to the walker. Because he could stand up. He just couldn't get all the way there because he couldn't let go of the handle. So what pushed him forward was this, in that moment of frustration, was, I'm frustrated now, but I'm going to try again because I'm going to walk again one day.
And so my last question, Stephanie, is what is your biggest advice or best tip for stroke survivors on their recovery journey?
I think it comes back to the original reason I wrote the book. Prior to my stroke, and of course since, those who have the most optimal recovery are the ones with the best mindset. I think of the Henry Ford quote that says, "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right." It's plain and simple. If I don't ever think I'm going to walk again, I probably won't, because I'm probably not even going to try. But if I can open up my mind a bit and not have this rigid thinking, and possibly think of outside the box ways to do certain things, like we were talking before about breaking those goals down, just get creative with it. If you think you can, you probably will.
Oh, I love that. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for being here today and not only sharing your ebook to help us with this fundraiser, but just sharing your insights. And, as a physical therapist and as a stroke survivor, you have such a unique perspective, and I think it's really important, for everybody in our audience to hear. I hope that everyone has taken something really valuable away from this interview. Just so you know, I am going to be leaving a link down in the description below, again, to that PayPal fundraiser. All month long in May, any donation to Post Stroke will get you a free copy of Stephanie's book, Stroke Recovery Momentum. Please read this book. It is absolutely amazing. She's got even more amazing things to say throughout the book than what we covered just in our short interview today. As always, if you found this video helpful, please make sure to leave it a like. And if you're new here or haven't already, subscribe to the channel and click the bell to get notifications for when I post new videos. Post Stroke is a nonprofit, and you can help us keep our content free, either by donating via our PayPal fundraiser that you can find the link to in the description below, and you will get a free copy of Stephanie's ebook, Stroke Recovery Momentum, by giving us a super thanks down in the YouTube bar below, or by becoming a Patreon member, in which a monthly donation gets you access to cool perks like social media shoutouts, behind the scenes footage, and even YouTube shoutouts, of which I have a few today. Thank you so much to all of our patrons, and a special thank you to Heather G and Modus Nova in our Empowerer tier. We can't do what we do without you all. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.